The truth needs no prop. Men are good.
Men are indeed good, as are you, and as is this group. What a great group we have, and what an excellent book this group is going to talk about today. So we've got some treats in store for you, and let's go through the group here. Lisa Britton is with us today, and Lisa is notorious for her teaching women about men's issues. She's doing it through Evie Magazine and other formats, I think Los Angeles Times and a couple of other places. She also has a great Twitter account, so we'll leave links to those things below so you can check her out. Janice Fiamengo is the ultimate historian of feminism. Just incredible stuff she's done that exposes feminism as not being about equality, but being about female advantage. And in the process, denigrating men. And I'm telling you, Janice's Substack is so excellent. We'll leave links to that too below. Just amazing stuff. And every time I read something by her, I go, why didn't I think of that? Because it's new. It's new stuff. So Janice, my hat is off to you. And speaking of hat is off to, there's Warren Farrell. Warren, I hope you don't get pissed off with me, but I think you're the grandfather of men's issues. I mean, you've literally been doing this for 2 generations or more. Your first book was 74, and then 84 was the Why Men Don't, or what was the second one?
There was Why Men Are the Way They Are.
Yes, which I love dearly. But the Myth of Male Power is just the powerhouse of all of them, I think. But Warren has done individual books on many different segments of our issues, including men and boys, the pay gap, and last one has been on relationships. So Warren, so glad to have you here today. I'm really curious to hear what you all have to say about David's book. And then we have David Shackleton. David has been, what would you call him, a keen observer of issues, particularly gender issues, for years and years. And he's done numerous things, including the Everyman Journal and the, what was the book you wrote, Daughters of Feminism, with Janice doing the Sons of Feminism, and The Hand That Rocks the World, and now the book Matrisensus. And I got to thank you for this book, David, because David's book puts a template, a map of the psychological underlying of what's going on with both woke and feminism. It really helped me to understand. I'm telling you, I was scratching my head long before, wondering why? Why would people do that? Why would they even think that way? And this book really helps to congeal that and understand it in a new kind of way. So David, many thanks for this book. And the title of the book is Matrisensus, which is basically a new word to me. And I wondered if we could start off by David kind of describing what that means. What is Matrisensus, David?
Yeah, so Matrisensus is a word that I coined because we don't have a word to name the feminine collective shadow. We don't have that. We have it for men, courtesy of feminism. They gave us patriarchy. And, a lot of men don't like patriarchy because it labels as all bad the male competence hierarchy, which is, for the most part, quite functional in society.
Right.
And we don't have a name for that either, which is why we have to use a description. But we do have a name for when that becomes self-serving, and that's patriarchy. And so I coined Matrisensus as a similar portmanteau word. It consists of matri, meaning feminine, and sensus as an abbreviation of consensus. And so, because it takes the form of a social consensus. And the way that patriarchy is similarly a portmanteau word, patri for masculine, archy as an abbreviation of hierarchy. So I was talking just this past week with a guy who attended one of my presentations a little while ago, and he said, I was impressed with your courage in talking about these issues. Most people don't talk about these kinds of male-female issues, especially men, in that way. And I said, well, that's it. That thing you're talking about, that identifies what you can talk about and what you shouldn't talk about, what you can say and what you shouldn't. That's Matrisensus. That's the social consensus that we all kind of take in, and for most of us, let it run our behavior.
Yes.
That's it. And so now we have a name for it. I think that this name is very sort of obvious in retrospect. It fits very well. I think that it's going to eventually be the name that we use because we need a name. And this is the one. So I think this is why I made it as the title of my book. I wanted to give it as much prominence as I could.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, let's start with what were your impressions of the book, guys? Who wants to go first?
I'll say something about it, and I'll just pick up from what David just said, which is that this idea that what we need to be aware of is a structure of feeling, often unconscious, that guides our thinking and responses and decisions as a whole society about what we can say, who we can care about, whose concerns matter most, where criticism can be leveled. I think that is a really brilliant insight that the book makes. And I was aware, of course, of the idea generally before David finished the book because I know that he's talked about it over the years as he's been working towards this book. And we've had many conversations where David fleshed out the idea. And I have found it so useful because I think often I speak and others do of feminist ideology. And certainly that is central in the issues that we're addressing about men and boys and, about whose concerns matter in our world. But David is getting at something that's deeper than ideology because ideology suggests at least reasonably coherent set of beliefs that are consciously held, whereas I think many people who don't consider themselves feminists and or even some anti-feminists, people who have never thought about feminist ideology, still operate according to the Matrisensus because it is about feelings and it's about like very deeply held patterns for understanding the world. And so now I always think of David when I confront a situation where something doesn't really make rational sense. A set of behaviors are often quite self-contradictory, destructive for the person or the people group that is embracing them, and yet it feels right. And that feels right is so powerful, and it's difficult to argue someone out of something that feels right because it does have that archetypal power. So that's for me the thing about the book that has such enormous explanatory power is this idea of a structure of feeling. And so I guess that's my response. I really appreciate that. It has helped me. It is, as you said, Tom, it's like a template for understanding so much.
Yeah.
And once we see that we've taken a set of ideas and ways of thinking, ways of being that apply to the family and have applied them to society at large, to the workplace, to politics, to policy. That really helped me understand what drives so many behaviors and attitudes. So I really appreciate that insight, David. And I guess maybe you could say a little bit more about that and how you came to that understanding, if you wanted to, or how it connects to your earlier book, The Hand That Rocks the World, which I found is also a really insightful book.
Thank you, Janice. I should mention that Janice wrote the foreword to the book. So to answer your question, after I wrote The Hand That Rocks the World, which came out in 2015, that was focused on gender, on men and women. And I realized that what was that the psychology underneath the gender pattern was also underneath all of the other identity politics areas, was underneath the racial identity politics and the trans and the gay. And so I thought, what I've done is just a partial treatment in that book. And so I started thinking more broadly about about what it was that underlay all of identity politics. And as I followed that, the other thing that was really interesting to me was why it was so compulsive. Why people were, what I was observing was something that was psychologically powerful in that it was able to shut down dissent and carry the day, even though it wasn't logically consistent or self-consistent. It was a narrative that you could poke holes in, but it didn't seem to matter for those people who held it. And secondly, it was psychologically coherent, which means that there were millions of people all marching in lockstep under the influence of whatever this was, all basically seeing things the same way and feeling the same way about things. And so those two things, the psychological power and the psychological coherence, are the hallmarks, are the signature of a psychological archetype. And an archetype is something that we all share in common, that we inherit. It's a brain structure which supports a particular way of being in the world, of understanding the world and being in the world. And they were placed there by evolution over billions of years. So, an example of that is how human infants learn speech, because it's an astonishing accomplishment that a baby learns to talk in a year or so from nothing. And no other creature does that. And so how it's explained is that evolution has put into our brains an organ, a portion of the brain that is dedicated to learning speech. And it has two pieces. One of them is all of the structure that supports the pattern of speech, things like, rules of grammar, the idea of parsing sounds into words, the idea that words carry meaning, all of these kinds of structural things, and lots of capacity to absorb all of those thousands and thousands of words. And secondly, it provides the motivation. It provides the reason that infants pay attention so compulsively to what the people around them are, the noises they're making, and try to practice them and try to understand them. It's an exhaustive and, as I said, an astonishing accomplishment. And that's the power of archetypes. That's what archetypes do. They provide structured patterns and they provide motivation. And so that's what we're looking at in Matrisensus, is we're looking at something that motivates and provides a pattern for understanding the world. And so that was the thing. Once I realized that it had to be archetypes that was underneath this, then it was just a matter of figuring out which archetype was being distorted into a shadow form, into a dysfunctional pathological form, underlying the whole world of identity politics and much more, as it turned out. And probably the biggest new idea in the book is the insight that the archetype that is being applied at the society level is actually the family archetype. It's actually the archetype that was placed in us by the fact that we all grew up in families, but going back thousands and thousands of years. And so we have been shaped to make families work. We have been shaped to have patterns of behavior and expectation and understanding that facilitate the success and the survival of families. And so when that gets applied at the scale of society, it doesn't fit. It doesn't work, and it becomes a shadow form. Because and of course that's why identity politics is about identity, because family is identity. Family is about who's in the family and who isn't. That's what matters. And we treat them entirely differently. And so that's why when you lay it onto society, we get this us and them polarization, because that's what the family does. And so anyway, that was how I got to this new book from the one of 2015.
David, one of the things that sort of strikes me about what you're saying, and tell me if this applies, or that our archetype is in some ways that we need women more than we need men. That we need that that the world can survive on a relatively small percentage of women compared to the percentage of men, and men need to be able to protect women and be able to save them from being hurt. And the female therefore chooses a man who is the great protector, the best protector, the best provider among us. And so then we have things like men dying sooner of 14 out of the 15 leading causes of death. But yet we have 8 federal offices of women's health and 0 federal offices of men's health. That's the outgrowth of an archetype of feeling that women are more endangered than men are, and we need to protect them to a greater degree. That sort of grows out of the archetype of women being needed and deserving of protection to a greater degree than men do. Does that?
Yes, that's absolutely archetypal. That's being built into us, those beliefs, and as Janice said, that's what feels right to us, and it feels right because it worked for survival, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife's a birder, and she,
Your wife's what?
in conversation with her,
Bird.
she's a bird watcher.
Oh, bird.
And in conversation with her, I realized that this is actually just the same in the animal kingdom. Like, why are male birds brightly colored with bright plumage, and the females are drab?
So the predator
It's
will
that
get
very
the
thing. It's so that when a predator comes along, he goes after the male and not the female. The female is much better camouflaged because the death of the female is more consequential for the survival of the infants, of the offspring, than the death of the male. And so, nature is ruthless. Nature just says, it's focused on reality. If that's the reality, that's the way we're going to shape you, to make sure that happens that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Who else wants to offer their comment? Warren, Lisa?
I've already said something. Lisa, what about you?
I'll mention something. I thought your book was fascinating. One of my speaking points and my beliefs is that the breakdown of the relationship between men and women, it is the root cause of most of our societal ills. And we can see that where we get into the men and women, feminine, masculine, but even when crime, it really expands to everything. So one of my big speaking points is how the breakdown of that relationship between men and women is causing so much societal destruction. But it goes deeper than that, and it's hard to articulate about the breakdown between the masculine and the feminine itself, and for people to understand that connection. And so I feel like in your book, first of all, is like a textbook. Like it has so much information in it.
Yes,
And for
yes.
someone like me who is not only passionate about the topic, but also trying to explain to other women and men as well what I'm talking about, it's a great resource for me to go back to and look look at the myths and look at, you hit a chord in it. It just goes so deep that some people could say, get a little offended or whatever by it, but it reminds me of that saying, facts don't care about your feelings. And if everybody read it, they would realize that it taps into the truth. So that's what I really loved about your book, that it taps into something that deep within us all we know. So I highly recommend your. I was just speaking to my mom about your book. She really wants to read it. So I just want to say thank you. It's almost like a resource for me and the writing and work that I'm trying to do.
Indeed.
Thank you, Lisa.
It is
Tom, what
like,
about you?
well, it is like a resource. It's just incredibly like a resource. I was thinking the other day, I was thinking, I need to read this again, because,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
did. I read a couple of things again, and I thought, I didn't get that the first time. It's like,
That's how I felt
it's,
too. I was
it's
like, I need to
really,
go through
it's,
everything like
it's
several
rich.
times.
It's very
Mm.
rich. And,
Hmm.
one of the things that struck me about the book was the very beginning when David talked about the contributions of women to the family, which I thought was absolutely fascinating and so correct and so beautiful that actually it's been women who have transformed families from being fairly, what would you call it, primitive, into a loving unit that we hopefully have today. And that whole thing, and you cited research along with that about how things have happened with that. That was just absolutely fascinating to me. But I think even that, and the other thing that just struck me about the book, which is keeps on striking me, is the whole idea of basically identity being the reason for either punishment or benefit, right? I mean, if you think in a certain way, if you have an identity in a certain way, therefore you will get X, Y, Z, which is typical in families. And I hadn't really thought about it too much before, but the typical family, we're concerned about our family, not the next door neighbor so much, a little bit, but really our concern is for our own family. And it's that idea, that consciousness that's been plopped down into our decision-making processes, which has completely thrown things off. And, that part of the book just made me dance. It was just, I loved it. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree. Just to pick up from that, yeah, one of the things I said in my foreword was that it is a book that I'm just seconding what you said. It's a book that you have to read it slowly. It's that is not to say that it's a heavy book. It's not,
Right.
like turgid in any way or abstruse. It's not that kind of book. It's not an academic book or a theoretical in that sense. It's very clear and very readable, but it's deep. And I agree with you, Tom. Like you can get through a chapter, they're short chapters, easy to read, but there's so much there that needs to be reflected on that
Yes.
you want to go back and read it again. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And yeah, I think Northrop Frye, a Canadian literary critic, said that really good works of literature create a whole world that you can live inside for a long, long time, even for your whole life. You can live inside that world, and I feel that about this book, even though it's nonfiction. But the framework that you've provided, David, you can live inside in terms of thinking and understanding
Yes.
the world with
Yes.
it. One thing that I want to ask about, because it really struck me too in the book, was the emphasis on male shame and how that. I mean, you talk about how what happened in the 20th century was that there was this collapse of masculine authority, and it happened gradually and then sort of suddenly, I guess, in the 1960s, late 1960s, and and part of that had to do with men being shamed for their failures and men accepting that shame. And you point out this is like epoch making and probably completely unprecedented in world history that men accepted their own moral defeat and could not mount a resistance to it. And we see that so much still today, 50, 60 years after the events that you're pinpointing in the book, where and as you point out, that shame was unmerited to a large extent. And yet still I feel that, that men are constantly accused upbraided, ridiculed, condemned and shamed. And so many men accept it, even though often, I mean, 99.9% of the time, the accusations are either false or they're only a partial, small part of the whole picture.
Yes.
And the male shame is such a powerful motivator and such a powerful weapon in women's arsenal in particular. And it's very difficult to overcome. So I wondered if you could say a little bit about the role of male shame and why is it that women don't feel shame for the things that we do wrong?
I think, again, this is archetypal. I think we've been shaped that way by our evolutionary history. And the reason that males are so vulnerable to shame is because we evolution crafted an honor code for men, because men had the political power, men had the greater physical strength, men were the soldiers, the warriors, and so the way to control a warrior class is through honor, is through dishonor and honor, and that's why you see the military give medals and or dishonorable discharges and so on. Honor is central. And that notion of an honor code is built into most men, and basically what we would call good men feel that. And it's partly, and it's largely archetypal. We inherit it. And women, not so much, because their role was private and much less consequential in terms of the wider society. A poor ruler could destroy a society, and so essentially women hold the reins of that honor code in the archetypal structure, and so women shaming men has always been powerful in two ways, and one of them is at the political level, but the other is at the reproductive level, in that women have been always trying to find good partners, good husbands, good fathers, and the guy that was shamed, who was seen as unworthy, as dishonorable, did not get to reproduce. So this is massive historically, and so that, of course, also was a big factor in building this sensitivity to shame into men.
Like the whole white feather movement in the UK during World War I was,
Yes.
They passed out that white feather to shame a man that was not off in war fighting and being willing to die. I think we also see this more recently, to pick up Janice's point, in the with the women's movement. On the one hand, the women's movement started to a large degree as "I am woman, I am strong," and it evolved into "I am woman, I've been wronged." And the process as part of its evolution was sort of that women were, we had hashtag Me Too for women, but we didn't have, and men just listened and felt shamed, but they didn't have a hashtag Me Too. We didn't have a hashtag Me Too for men. So we sort of accepted that all the shame was exactly as it was. But in fact, what was being expressed is that women were expressing their feelings of powerlessness and their feelings of male power, but nobody was expressing the male experience of powerlessness and the male experience of female power. And so that's been completely left out of our culture for the last 50 years. And so what has evolved has been an enormous amount of shame. And either the men have sort of said, try to compete with each other to be more ashamed and therefore be more virtuous, or they've put their heads in the sand and hope the bullet would miss. And so it's,
I should probably define shame. Shame is an attack on who you are as a person, not what you've done, but who you are. Guilt is about what you've done.
Right.
But shame is that you are flawed as a person,
Right.
fundamentally. And that's what we see in coming out of these various identity movements all the time. We don't see attacks on what people have done. We see words of shame. So people are called misogynist. Well, that's who you are. It's not about
Right.
what you've done. It's about
Right.
who you are.
Right.
Or you're racist, or you're sexist, or you're a homophobe, or you're an Islamophobe, or you're all of these are shame attacks. And of course, with a shame attack, you can't defend yourself by saying, well, I've done good things,
Hmm.
because it's not about that.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. And I
Mhm.
would add too that the honoring thing is half of it. The other half is the hierarchy, because men live in a hierarchy that has to do with honoring, and honoring moves you up or down within that hierarchy. And who is it that determines how high you are up in the hierarchy, or how low you are? Women. So when women shame men, they feel a drop in their own status. And we know now, of course, that testosterone pushes men to strive for status. So we've got this push inside that says strive for status, and the push outside is the shaming if you don't conform to what women think you should. And that moves you down in the hierarchy.
Well, I'd say men often move each other up or down in the
That's
hierarchy.
true too.
We promote them, but then the result of being promoted in the hierarchy of male approval is that women will fall in love with us. Women fell in love with the officer and the gentleman, not the
Right.
private and the pacifist.
Right. Exactly.
There's zero interest in the man who doesn't succeed, which really forms all of us. We're afraid to come home and talk about what our feelings are because if a woman loses respect for us, she'll then lose love for us. Every man intuitively knows, and every woman intuitively knows that she can't love a man that she doesn't respect.
Yep.
And so the man expressing his feelings becomes almost an impossibility, which is why the Japanese have an institution called the snack, where you stop on the way home from work and you pour out your feelings of the things that frustrated you at the day at work, and you pay about 5 times what you normally would for a snack, in order for somebody not to have sex with you, not to touch you, just to listen to you and allow you to dump out all the feelings of shame that you've sort of had during the day, so you don't have to share that with your wife, so she won't lose respect for you, so she won't lose love for you.
Really? It's called a
Wow.
snack? Is that what you guys? Is
It's
that what
called
you
the snack, yes.
That's
That's
fantastic.
amazing.
We
That is
need more snacks
interesting.
in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yes.
and it applies it to the culture at large too, of course, because a culture that depends on male disposability, that
Mhm.
depends on many men dying or living lives of great pain in the work that they do. It's going to cause an early death, etc. You know about this probably more than anyone, Warren. It cannot hear men's pain.
Exactly.
It just can't. It can't have time for it. To go back to the issue of shame, though, for a second, like I hear what you're saying, David, about how it matters more for men that they not commit acts of dishonor. A single soldier could
Right.
could get his entire unit killed if he
Right.
does something wrong or becomes is overcome by fear in the moment when he mustn't. That kind of thing. I can see
Right.
that. But there did used to be a system of shame for women, perhaps not quite so powerful, but quite powerful. You know, a woman who betrayed her husband, for example, was shamed. And yet it
Or
seems that sexual,
sexual
yeah,
shame, like the
A woman who
spouse.
a woman who had sex before marriage.
Right.
before
Is
Right.
marriage
Right.
or
Right.
Even,
Or
yes,
divorced.
exactly. You know, there were centuries and centuries where that was an issue, certainly. And yet it seems that all was done away with relatively easily. Now we have women doing their slut walks and shouting their abortions and talking about how they want to have an affair or they have had multiple affairs. I mean, you can find on TikTok, reams and reams of women bad mouthing their husbands, talking about their affairs, why they can't stand their husbands, why they don't want to be sexual with their husbands. All of that whole structure of female honor was done away with in really a few short decades. And so that's kind of fascinating too, that there really isn't anything anymore that um, women can be ashamed about, unless it's that they're too male adjacent. They can be a pick me, or they can be, a patriarchal drone, or something like that. Certainly, those techniques of shame are used against women who care about men and speak about men's issues, but they're not used against women for any of the traditional
Mhm.
reasons. So that's kind of interesting to me.
It's
Lisa,
interesting.
have you been shamed for your support of men?
Yeah.
I was shamed yesterday for my support of men. I posted a comment that I got, but I have compassion for those people because it's just projection. They obviously don't know what I'm trying to say, or what Janice would be saying. So they pretty much put words in my mouth in the message. How dare you say this quote? Which is something I would never say. So to me, it seems like, okay, this person is projecting who they think I am onto me
Right.
to try to get me to be quiet. And that has nothing to do with me. So I actually posted about that yesterday. So
Mm.
yeah, so there, but the shame does come in. I would say Janice is right there. There's not a few instances where you could kind of shame women these days because they tell us to stand tall, never be ashamed of who we are. But shame's an interesting thing because shame can be beneficial to keep a civilization doing the moral thing, you know? So it can be a tool in a way where people don't want to steal because they don't want to be ashamed or do something bad because they don't want to be ashamed. It's when shame is weaponized and used to put down a whole group of people, despite like a young boy did not do the bad things they're saying men did throughout the centuries, you know, but they're still shaming an individual for something he had nothing to do with.
Mhm.
So I believe what we're seeing today and for decades now is weaponized shame. And shame is an emotion that can destroy people, and it can eat away at their confidence, at their soul. So I believe a big part of the problem we're seeing today with male mental health, suicide rates, everything has a lot to do with this societal weaponized shame that we've been putting on boys and men. It's really unfair.
I
And
think
it
too,
does seem fairly one way, doesn't it? I mean, the weaponized
Oh,
shame seems to be
100%.
focused on men and boys and misses
Yeah.
the women and girls completely.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
the women and girls today, we don't really get any shame. They no matter what we do, no shame. Unless they do shame you a little bit if you want a conservative, traditional
Yeah.
family or lifestyle. That's shame
That's
today. So it's interesting. Women are being shamed for the things that they used to not be shamed for. It's like it
yes.
switched
Yes.
places. But
Yes.
yeah, and
That's
you see a lot of people standing up for those women. Don't shame women for wanting to be a stay-at-home mom, you know? So you do see that. You don't see as many people standing up saying, don't blanket shame all boys and men
Yes.
for this, that, and the other thing.
I
Yes,
think
and
one of
the shaming of women who support traditional roles for women, for example, it's not particularly harsh. The implication is she's been duped, she's been abused, she hasn't been allowed to be empowered and enlightened, and all she needs is to be
Yeah.
properly educated into her rights and freedoms, and then she will throw off the shackles of her patriarchal conditioning. So yeah, I think you're right. There is some shaming involved, but it's nothing like what boys experience if they even look at a girl in the wrong way, or tell a sexist joke, or or touch a girl in the wrong way. So yeah, it is amazing the asymmetries of shame today.
Indeed.
Yeah. Yeah. The women get presumed to be sort of helpless.
Yes.
And whereas the men are presumed to have base motives, to be malicious.
Yeah.
it's a really I think one of the big things that's happened is that we're talking here to a large degree about what's happening in wealthier countries in the middle and upper middle class, where in
Yeah.
the old days the archetype was survival. And today, the archetype is I want to be able to do what I want to do. It's meaning. It's fulfillment. And when I first started to write, and my father realized that I was interested in writing, his comment from his generation, born in 1910, is Warren, if you write, you'll oftentimes not find a publisher, and if you can't find a publisher, you'll never find a wife. And it was sort of like it was like you can't. This is very sweet, Warren, that you can write well, but it's not like what you can make a living doing. And so don't even think about it because it's not you don't have the right to be able to not produce. And if you don't produce, you'll never have a wife, you'll never have a family, you'll never do all the things that will be satisfying and gratifying to you in the long run. And so now with in wealthier nations in the middle and upper middle class, women were able to survive. And so what they didn't have a chance to do during the old days when neither men nor women had rights, they had responsibilities, they had obligations. They didn't have rights. My father and grandfather never talked about rights. My mother never talked about rights. They talked about responsibilities. And so it was, and suddenly the women's movement started talking about rights because they came from, for the most part, middle and upper middle class in wealthier nations, and they could begin to think beyond how do I survive, but I want the right to be able to do anything I want across the spectrum. And then and that would have been okay enough. But the false assumption was that men had all these things, as opposed to saying, well, men, we want to free you to be able to be with the family. Pew Research Center shows that 49% of full-time working men would prefer to be full-time with the family. And that type of data just doesn't get out there to say that both sexes were prevented from doing things that they want to do, and men were prevented from even thinking about it. And the fact that we're prevented from thinking about it even today, 50 years later, after women have been thinking about it for 50 years, is really quite a statement.
Yes, indeed.
Well, what women didn't realize when they stepped onto the world stage out of the family environment was that the family environment had been a protected space. Men, by providing and protecting, had created an artificial space in the home, which was relatively free of the constraints that the world asserted. Women, mothers, typically didn't have to worry over much about the things that the father was taking care of, the provision. So they had this protective space where they were pretty free. They were always fairly free to make their decisions without concern about long-term implications and so on. Just what felt right to do with the children here in the family. And so I think that is now part of the archetype, is part of the family archetype, because the family was a protected space. It was insulated from financial consequences, from consequences of, it was protected from violence. It was protected from as long as the men were reasonably successful. So that freedom is not a new thing that women claim. It's simply been transplanted into the world when women stepped out of the family role to public roles. That sense of entitlement to freedom and to not be constrained.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
What are your thoughts, Tom?
Oh, I keep thinking about the importance of the identity piece and how that's so critical and how it explains so much that we see today. How we see people so endeared with these victim groups, and they think the victim groups can do no wrong, zero wrong, almost like a mother in a family. The child can do no wrong, but anyone who might even think poorly about that victim group, they're terrible. They're awful. Yeah. And David's book explains that. He explains why that is, how it happens, what to expect. Oh my gosh. I mean, to me, that's just a gift, because it makes total sense to something that absolutely made no sense before.
Well, it's quite a compliment about your book, David.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Tom.
I'm endeared.
That has been my passion, to get to the bottom, the psychological substrate, the very bottom of the simple mechanism that is driving complex social behavior. That's been my passion for years. I mean, it's more than a passion; it's been an obsession. I've structured my life around that search.
David, what do you receive from that? What happens in your heart, your soul, your relationship with your wife, relationship with yourself, as a result of being able to accomplish that more rather than less?
Well, it's been intensely satisfying. I mean, I discovered in myself a talent for that, for perceiving the simple underlying patterns of complex human behavior. And so to actually exercise that talent, I feel very blessed. I feel very lucky that I've been able to deliver what I think is, sort of the final product of that many years of endeavor in a form that really satisfies me, that really feels like it is the answer, that's the truth. And so that's wonderful. Now, that's the upside. There is also a way that it's been a curse, because it has absolutely shaped my life. I mean, from when I was a young adult. I mean, there was a time when I became obsessed with reading nonfiction books, and books about culture, books about religion, books about politics, books about philosophy. I read 2 books a week for 5 years. 2 books a week for 5 years. I had a tank bookseller. I would order them from the footnotes of the book I was reading, the other books, and read them. And then I was driven to do that. And then it stopped after 5 years. Somehow it was good. And then I insulated myself. I cut off my newspaper, my television, everything. And I started, and I became reflective for several more years. And out of that quiet, that solitude, I started to develop my own models, my own ideas about what was going on. So, this is some sense of you can see how it's been an influence in my life that has really been wonderful and terrible.
On the terrible part, David, usually things like this, devotions like this, come into conflict with our spouse, with our decision to have children, with the amount of income we make, therefore where we have to live, places we can't live, can't travel to. What are some of those types of, mess of tensions that created? To do this.
Well,
I'm asking this part because I think
yes.
everyone who aspires to write has to understand what we're getting into. That we're going to probably, on the average, earn less, and therefore all these little ramifications that are really life evolve out of those types of decisions. So just maybe let's go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had 2 failed marriages before I got together with Christine 30 years ago, and that's been very successful. But it has had, she's been willing to accommodate my obsession. She supported it, and so I was very lucky there. But those 2 failed marriages came out of my. I started off quite distorted around gender because my mother was dominant and she was shaming at my father and at me, in my childhood. And so, I got started on this in 1987 when my first wife left me, and she told me she was taking our dog to the vet. We had no kids, we had a dog. She wanted the dog, so she said she was taking the dog to the vet, and then she called me up and said, "I've left you." And I said, "Why did you do it that way?" And she said, "Well, I was afraid you'd be violent if I talked to you about what I was thinking." And I looked around in the world and I saw that that was the narrative in the world about, you know, male perpetrators and female victims. And I thought, there's something wrong about that, because my own experience had been a powerful mother and a weak father. And so out of that contradiction, I just got interested in it as a puzzle, and then it took over my life. In terms of income, absolutely, I have, you know, I left a high income job with a telecom company when I was 30, and never, you know, and published the magazine about men's issues, you know, and I never made more than 20% of what I was making since then. So, you know, it certainly has lowered my income substantially. Christina's always made more than me all the time we've been together.
And she's been fine with that.
Yeah, she's been okay with that. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And your second,
luckily,
was your
because
second,
of my work on myself, I've been okay with that too.
good.
But yeah, so, you know, it's noticeable that since the book has been published, I'm experiencing a feeling I never felt before in my life, which is that there's a load off my back that I didn't know I was carrying.
Interesting.
I feel like I put something down, and I'm going, "Whoa, that's good." You know? And I didn't even know. I never noticed the lack of that feeling before.
Yes.
That's amazing. I, for one, David, really appreciate your gift. You know, because I have a gift too, and my gift is reading psychological theories and living them. When I remember in college, I started realizing that when I read a certain theory, I'd become that theory for a while. It's like my whole being was that. And so I really enjoy reading yours because it did the same thing for me. You know, I kind of became that for a while. And it's a interesting experience, and thank you for that.
Yeah. I remember, Tom, when I first made a presentation to you of these ideas about, it must be 2 years ago, in Warren's White House Council group.
Right.
And you were quite skeptical. You know, you were saying, "Oh no, I don't think I lost moral authority. I don't have any sense of that." So,
well,
so
I still feel like that.
To watch you move as you've gone deeper into my ideas by reading the manuscript.
Yes. Well, I appreciate what you've done.
Yes.
Yeah, indeed.
So do I. Yes.
Were there any surprises for people from the book? Anybody have surprises that struck them?
Well, I was surprised, I think, by the tone of hopefulness at the end, because you do hold out some. Well, you make some observations about areas in our culture that you think are coming out of the dominance of the Matrisensus, that there is some pushback. And I think that's a little different from what a lot of people are feeling right now, or a lot of people are arguing right now. And I thought that was, so I was surprised and gladdened to read your analysis of ways in which our culture is changing to start to come to a more balanced understanding of masculine and feminine roles. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, it's a good point to say that the book actually had kind of, in my mind, 3 sections. One was the first part about women and men and how we work things. And then the next part was the Matrisensus part. The last part was, how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this? What do we do? And all parts were interesting. You know, I enjoyed all parts. How about other people?
Lisa?
Yes, I also liked how it was, what do we do about this? A lot of people like to talk about the problems, but they don't have any solutions. And when somebody gives solutions for whether it be like a self-help book or a book like this, there's something we can work with. The writer, the thinker, put in the time to think about, how do we get out of this? How do we solve this problem?
Yes.
So, and it's deeper than just coming up with ideas. You have to dig deep into what could we all do on a societal level, individual level. I thought that was amazing. And what I was impressed by was the level of compassion in the book. especially towards like a female reader, while still being assertive with the information there. And even though there was some things that I could imagine, not me, because think a little differently, I think, than the average my age women. I felt this level of, I could see where someone might take a little offense, but it was so smoothed over. Like there was a level of compassion that you hit where it was like you weren't trying to offend anybody or say anything that would be controversial. It was just like hitting the truth, and people would just kind of nod and be like, okay, yeah, I see that. So there's a level of compassion that you probably gathered over the years of work that you've done, where you had to maybe tiptoe around conversations a little bit, but it was definitely felt in the book.
Yeah.
Mhm.
David,
Yes, and that,
I want to confirm that as well and really acknowledge you for that, because that for me is extremely important in my writing. And so I'm very conscious of, sort of how do I get at the truth and honor women at the same time. And you did a really good job of that.
Mm.
yes.
Thank you. I I feel a lot of compassion for women in this situation. That they're riding this archetypal wave, and it's powerful. It's not easy to get off that, or even to see it.
Mhm.
And so while it's relatively easy to just go to anger about what they're doing, I don't think that the anger is fully justified, because we need to see just how compelling these archetypes are, and when they have us in our grip. James Hillman said they grip us like a god. They are utterly compelling.
Right.
And so when you see that, when you really feel that, then you see, you naturally feel compassion for people who are caught up in that.
Yes, yes. Janice,
Well,
you
in that
started to
way,
say.
oh yeah, I was just going to say that in that way, the style of your book is a expression of its theme, really. And I think that that's another way that the book is so powerful and brilliant, that because you talk about how our societies now are structured according to compassion without accountability for women in general, and accountability without compassion for men. And so you do write in this very clear-eyed, uncompromising way about the harms that the Matrisensus has done. And and you tell women that they don't get to cry victim in this case. They are going to have to take responsibility for what they have done, but you do it in a compassionate way. So I admire that. I don't tend to express very much of that myself, and so, but I
Me either.
recognize it in you and like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
I'm with Janice, actually. But anytime you're trying to persuade someone, you can't start from a I mean, you've got to kind of be with them for a while. You've got to kind of understand them. And I think the book did a good job of that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, if I have a model that criticizes polarization of accountability and compassion, then I'm obliged to offer
Yes.
both, as a demonstration of what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yes. Yes, well said.
And I have to get going.
Warren, do you have to get going?
I do.
Well, then I guess we're about finished. Is there anything anybody wants to say before we stop?
I wanted to say thank you, David,
Indeed, me
for your
too.
work. Every
Yes.
contribution from everybody in this space pushes that ball further, and you were a major contributor. So
Yes.
thank you for everything you've
Indeed.
done.
Well said. I agree.
Indeed. Yes.
100%.
Me
And
too.
I want to thank all the people here who are, three of you are the authors of endorsements on the back cover, and one is the author of the foreword. So major supporters of the work. Thank you for that.
It's a good group,
Absolutely.
eh? Good
Thank
group.
you. Yeah, a really outstanding group we got together today.
Good. So we will stop there. And David, thanks again. And thank you all for being here, Janice, Lisa, and Warren. And we'll see you on the next one. We always say when we stop, men,
are
Mostly good.
Men are good, as are you.